By 1844, the seeds of Mormonism had fully ripened in the heart and mind of Joseph Smith. For the most part, his visions and dreams had been put down on paper, his desires were openly and secretly put into practice, and now Mormonism was ready to be sown in the hearts of people by the stable hands of other men. Like all visionaries and shamans, Joseph Smith had run his course and, in my opinion, was beginning to kind of unravel at the seams. And a more pragmatic, less freewheeling man began to sweep the dust up left by Joseph Smith and his charismatic ways. Where Joseph provided the doctrinal foundation for all things Mormon, Brigham Young gave this doctrine legs. In a sense, Mormonism to this very day is little else but a compilation of what these two men did and said. Very little, with the exception of some 20 and 21st century public relations spin, originates from any other source than Joseph Smith and Brigham Young. Doctrinally, Mormonism remains Joseph Smith's baby. Culturally, it primarily smacks of all things Brigham Young. Mormonism up to this day and age has been chiefly focused on a singular theme, all things considered: power and control. Everything Mormonism does today somehow contributes to the retention or growth of these two ugly sisters. The quest for power is manifested in 1,000 different ways. It is at the heart of their being overly concerned with their image. It is the motive behind amassing great amounts of wealth. It is the driver behind constant and consistent growth, behind their statistical information, behind the numbers game that they cause everybody at the ward and stake levels to play every day of every week of every month of every year. And it's facilitated by a top-down ecclesiastical line of authority similar to a military exercise. Like it or agree with it or not, the quest for power was the ultimate motive for Joseph Smith, Brigham Young, and it lies at the very heart of the institution called Mormonism today. Now, to the common men and women like you and me, everyday folk, the fact that Mormonism is overtly and subvertly concerned with gaining and retaining power is for the most part a non-event. We spend most of our time just trying to make ends meet, putting food on the table, fuel in the car, keeping a roof over our heads, and we really don't have the time or inclination to care about what drives the institution, so long as the institution is working for us and to our benefit. This is understandable, but a regrettable fact in modern religious life. I received an email from a man named Alex, a PhD, who told me he has an LDS colleague who says, quote, "Even if Mormonism is untrue, the benefits are so good I would never leave it," end quote. Someone very close to me used to say this same thing. Alex asked me if I would ever belong to something that was false if it proved otherwise beneficial to me and my family. I replied with an emphatic no, at least not intentionally. Peace if possible, but truth always. We are selling our souls pure and simple if we know something to be false, if we know there's something wrong, but because we're benefiting by it personally, we stay in and support it. When we embrace something that is untrue to benefit ourselves, it's one of the ultimate forms of selfishness and not a form of the Christian ethic, selflessness. This is why we discuss church history on this program, and this is why we're going to spend 2009 continuing on from the death of Joseph Smith to the present day. This is why we examine the historical foundations. Well, you might say, every major religion has an ugly history. Everyone has skeletons and things and things of which they are ashamed. To this, I would wholeheartedly agree. And then with this, I would ask, so what does that tell you about organized religion? What does that tell you about placing your faith and your salvation in something that claims that you have to have it in order to be saved? Wouldn't this suggest that an individual's spiritual solutions do not lie in an institutional religion, but in direct relationships with God? Doesn't religious history tell everyone, doesn't religious history scream to all of us to find a relationship with Jesus rather than a religion that constantly uses his name? One of the benefits, however, to the fact that all major religions have horrible pasts is that it enables us to then see how much integrity they possess in their present state. I have no problem if a religious institution that has an ugly past, if it is willing, here in the present, to stand up to the past, admit it, and renounce their evil actions of yesteryear. When an institution insists on either covering or sustaining their evil past, it only serves to illustrate how much more sinister they are in the present day. So we begin our examination of Mormonism and its history relative to today's church. On almost any given day of the week, visitors from all over the world come to a place called Temple Square here in Salt Lake City. There at the Joseph Smith Memorial Building, a multi-million-dollar film directed and produced by an Academy Award-winning LDS filmmaker named Keith Merrill is shown every hour and a half. As you walk in the door, kindly men and women in soft tones offer you tissues, preparing you to emotionally identify with what you are about to see and experience. They suggest to you before the film even begins that you are going to experience something very special. And then they roll the film. Here, like in everything else LDS, image takes place of truth, and visitors, investigators, and members alike are shown a false representation of LDS history. Why? Because in the name of image and control, Mormonism today cannot present the truth. In order to retain power and control and keep their image up, they cannot share the truth with its own members or with the public at large. Such an action would go contrary to their overall purposes of control and retaining power. So what are audiences shown? Wooden and single-dimensional characterizations of the man Joseph Smith aimed at gathering honor and tears and homage in his name. You are presented with revised data, which, if it were left whole, would lead to doubting, to questioning, and to seeing things as they should be seen in the light of truth. For example, in this film, they never tell you why anything happens. For instance, why did Joseph Smith's father-in-law hate him so badly? They don't answer that in the film. But history tells us quite frankly, that Joseph was a glass looker who was taking away his daughter, and he didn't like the fact that that's how he made his living. But they don't include that in the little film. Why was Joseph Smith in Harmony, Pennsylvania at the time? He was there because he was using a stone and a hat to find buried treasure. But they don't tell you that in the movie. Somehow he just winds up in Harmony, Pennsylvania as this nice, soft-spoken, handsome guy who smiles and winks at everybody. They don't tell you what he's doing there. Why was Joseph Smith tarred and feathered? In the movie, it makes it look like he was just being beaten and martyred for being who he was. Well, he was tarred and feathered primarily for hitting on a girl whose last name was Johnson. And he was also possibly tarred and feathered for the accusations that he was messing around on the side. Why did Joseph leave Kirtland, Ohio? The movie doesn't say. He was running from the law and because he was involved in a huge bank fiasco where people had lost all of their money. They don't tell you that in the movie. Why did the Missourians hate Mormons so much? On this case, they don't tell you why, but there are two sides to the story. Nobody deserved the persecution that they endured, but then again, they did cause some of the persecution that they experienced at the time. Why did Joseph Smith go to Carthage jail in the first place? In the movie, Hiram Smith comes up to Joseph and says, the governor wants us to go to Carthage. And Joseph says, if we go, we'll die. He doesn't tell you why he wants him to go to Carthage. He wants him to go to Carthage because Joseph Smith destroyed a printing press. One of the fundamental rights, freedom of speech, Joseph Smith destroyed. Why? Because this press was going to publish all his doings in polygamy with young underage girls secretly hid from his wife. He did not want that out, and so he destroyed the press. This got him sentenced to go to Carthage jail, where he was ultimately shot and killed. Why didn't they show Joseph Smith with kill two men in the shootout at Carthage jail? Why instead did they show him scream at the sight of his brother Hiram going down and then turn in cinematic glory and run for the window as though he was going to sacrifice himself so that Hiram couldn't be shot anymore? When in reality, he had a gun, which is in the possession of the LDS Church Historical Society, mounted proudly. He had a gun that he shot 3 people, killing 2 of them, and then he was shot and went to the window and kind of fell out after giving the Masonic cry for help. Why don't they include any of this? You know why. If you saw the movie and you're dabbing your eyes and you took that in like it was, you were misled by the people you want to trust. Oh, and there's more. Let's see. Everybody in the film who are good, they are like always, it's just like a classic Disney movie, you know. Everybody who's good is shining and happy and lovable and great. And the villains, I mean, they're all like characters for the Pirates of the Caribbean. Always drunken, always missing teeth, always have long hair. Joseph Smith. I mean, it's unbelievable. Polygamy isn't even mentioned in the film. That it was a huge undercurrent. It was a huge thing with the church at the time. This is what made them truly unique. This is why more men were joining. I mean, this is what the whole deal was about. They don't even touch polygamy. Joseph Smith, at least 33 wives. 33 before he's gunned down in Carthage jail in the shootout. Not martyred, gunned down. Why don't you know this stuff? Now, if you're tuning in for the first time, at this point, if you're stalwart LDS, you're feeling very uncomfortable and you're believing I'm the devil. But these things are not made up by me. I'm sharing them with you because I want you to have the truth so that you can at least break free from the chains that hold you bound in something that is false. Okay? They go on. It shows in this movie Joseph Smith translating the Book of Mormon. The plates are there on a table uncovered, and it's as though he's just translating these things to the scribe who sits over there nonchalantly writing. First of all, didn't happen. They were always covered or not even present while Joseph had his face in a hat looking at a rock and reciting what the text was for that day. I mean, it's endless. The Joseph Smith movie legacy is a tiny example of how Mormonism manipulates the truth in order to retain control. Their manuals, their lessons, their talks, their training, the image are all scrubbed and all revised, omitting anything the general public might consider questionable or disconcerting. What hasn't been changed, while they changed their history completely, what hasn't been changed, and this is kind of the sinister part, are their doctrines. So on the one hand, we're presented with a spick and span version of church history, which leads people to embrace questionable doctrine. When they have the one side, which is so cleaned up, and they watch it, believing, trusting their leaders that this is the reality, they say, this is so wonderful, I accept these strange doctrines. If the LDS Church owned up, taught, and represented their history as it happened and as it was, they would not be in a position to retain their doctrines. And if they could not retain their doctrines, they could not retain their control. Get it? The doctrine controls the hearts and minds of their people, while the stories that have been cleaned up reassure the people that the doctrines are correct. It's a 1-2 punch with its sanitized history, throw on the right, and combined with its errant doctrines, throw on the left, that allows Mormon hierarchy to retain control over millions and millions of people. A truthful story would make their doctrines no longer acceptable or binding. But a false and sanitized history with doctrinal revision, if they decided to start changing their doctrines willy-nilly, they could have an internal rebellion. So with power and control their main objective, Mormonism is stuck. The Mormon hierarchy is stuck with having to continue to deceive investigators and believers alike about their history, while at the same time refusing to admit doctrinal error or heresies that any of them ever existed. And so they're towing the line down into this kind of oblivion. The internet is showing you more and more what the examples of the false histories are, while at the same time Christianity is putting a hard press on them to say these doctrines are not biblical. So what should all of this say to you? It should say a few things. First, it should tell you to examine your histories. See if the brethren you trust with your salvation have told you the truth about the men who formed your religion, about Joseph and about Brigham. This year, we're going to look mostly, for the most part, at Brigham Young. You're going to be just as blown away about Brigham Young as you were about Joseph Smith in 2007. Oh, it doesn't matter to you that Joseph and Brigham were or who or said or did what they did. You're a modern Mormon who just loves the church in its present state. I hear that every now and then. Let me tell you, everything Joseph said and taught remains alive today. That's why you can't walk into a grocery store in Utah without seeing cards or billboards on the side of the highway that say, "Praise him." That's why at General Conference they still sing praise to the man. And everything Brigham Young did continues on today, as evidenced by Temple Square, Brigham Young University, and almost every small and large city in Utah having the same layout grid that Brigham Young brought over from Masonry and instituted here in the state that he was founding. Look at your history. We hope to help you with that this year. The second thing you can do is seek a relationship with God outside of the influence of organized religion and or people, including me. I'm not asking you to join another church. I'm not asking you to follow my church or send us money or praise another man. I'm suggesting you go to God directly and openly seek for Him to reveal to you His truth. Ask Him to open your eyes, your ears, your heart. Say, Lord, if you tell me something isn't right, I'm going to listen. I will follow you wherever you want me to go. Take that challenge. Take the Pepsi Mormon challenge. But it's not reading the Book of Mormon to see if a book is true. It's going to God and say, open my eyes to the truth so that I can follow you. Go to Him independently of everyone and everything. Ask Him to show you the truth. Open up the Bible and read. Begin in the Gospel of John. Try that as a support to your search for truth. Now is the time to know it. You can't discover or rest, find peace or salvation by embracing a religion, Joseph, Brigham, their religion, a philosophical system, Mormonism, Catholicism, Baptism, Baptist, Buddhism, Methodists, Christian Scientists, Pentecostalists. None of it will ensure you truth. None of it. Only Him, only Jesus, His history, His gospel, and you can know Him apart from all the stuff that you've been fed about this sanitized history and what they want you to buy into.